Ladies and gentlemen, joining us on this Thursday, September 24, 2009 edition is Congressman Ron Paul, live from Congress. Just got done with a vote. We just interviewed Congressman Grayson in the last hour. Great to have him on the team fighting the private Fed. Congressman, it is great to have you, sir.
Thank you. Good to be with you again.
I want to get in the final segment into your book coming out in the Fed, but first, I've got the Times of London, the London Telegraph, AFP, dollar under scrutiny at G20 summit. HSBC bids farewell to dollar supremacy. They say the world is now going to move away from the dollar. They're announcing global governments. President Klaus, your friend, you've been over there to speak as a guest of the government, is saying this is global government at the UN yesterday. So people are waking up, but now the establishment is making its move. Can you speak to what's happening with the dollar?
Well, the dollar, of course, today bounced up a little bit, but that's just temporary because of some announcements. But the dollar is in bad trouble, and they know it. And a lot of people ask me exactly what's going on at the G20 meetings, and, of course, there are a lot of announcements. But I think the really big stuff that goes on at these meetings is behind the scenes, and there are no announcements. My guess would be that behind the scenes they are really making the plans for what's going to replace the dollar reserve standard, because they're sick and tired of us getting a free ride. We get to print the money and get to spend it, and they're supposed to hang on to it as if it were gold. So, but they're planning on something else. But they have a job in front of them, because it's not easy creating another fiat currency. Usually, when a government ruins a currency, they go back to something more sound and back their currency or make gold and silver legal tender. They don't want to do that. That's why I suspect they'll move in the direction of just a new world order. And I hear, and I've heard Obama recently use that term again. They got to have a new world order, and they've been working on that for a long time. And I'm sure they're not worried all that much about a crisis coming, and they might look at it as an opportunity, for promoting their cause, and that's what we should be concerned about.
Well, that's what Congressman Grayson said last hour with us, is that the banks, he believes, have engineered this to create a crisis to vertically integrate society, and then they offer the solution as this new Bank of the World that will fund itself off carbon taxes and Tobin taxes. Al Gore's called for that. Gordon Brown this week, as you know, has called for a new world order under the Tobin tax, and that they're just going to have regional cashless systems with the big bank reserves already going to a cashless system, and then all the nation-state currencies will still be there, but they'll be globally standardized.
Yeah, but what we have going for us is that their system can't work. It's just sort of like worrying about the Soviet Union. We worried about it for a long time and had to be, and they were very powerful. But even Mises, long time ago, predicted it won't last. The system doesn't work. So what they're proposing really doesn't work. It's sort of like what they did, the IMF and our Treasury did in the 60s and early 70s. We're going to print money, and it's going to be worth $35 an ounce, and, guaranteed it. Well, the market overwhelms. So we should be concerned. We should fight it. We should expose them, and we should do our very best. But ultimately, the markets will rule. The biggest threat is probably the political threat, that how much are they going to crack down on us, how far are they going to go, and can we ever regain the influence on the government where their job is to protect us and protect our liberty rather than serving the special interest. That, to me, is really the bottom line.
Congressman, the Federal Reserve, as you know, has hired the top Enron lobbyist firm to come in the last 3 months and demonize the End the Fed protest. It's come out in the Baltimore Sun that the Army is surveilling the End the Fed protest, and that all protest is now being considered low-level terrorism. They're trying to demonize us that way. They've also told Congress, as you know, that, you're not allowed under the Constitution to get involved in what the Federal Reserve does, even though it's in the Constitution that the Congress control the issuance of currency and credit and set the monetary policy. So isn't that the ultimate big lie, to say that this thing that didn't come along until 1913, this private banking consortium, can tell Congress you're not allowed to be involved in what we do?
I mean, it's amazing how long they've gotten away with it, but we're getting the American people informed well enough that 75% of the people now, when they're polled, agree with us. I think it's interesting. I can give you a little tidbit about tomorrow, and maybe Alan told you the same thing. But, we're having hearings tomorrow on 1207, and Barney Frank has fulfilled his promise to me, And he gave me one witness, and they were going to have two panels. Ordinarily, the majority has two witnesses against one, 2-to-1. But then they have a government panel, which has to represent the body that we're addressing, which is the Federal Reserve. They were supposed to have three people testifying. Only one has agreed to come. On the second panel, where there were going to be two in opposition to 1207 and my one pick, those two canceled out too. So they're down to one person that came to testify against the 1207, and I suspect it may well be that they don't want to even be out there, really chopping at the bit. They might work behind the scenes behind us, but they're not interested in taking us on in a public forum.
They don't want to give any attention to it. They think it may be covered by the news networks. Ed Bernanke or somebody like that is there, but it's too late. As you've said many times, the momentum is now beginning to shift. The people are like, why can't we audit the Fed? They're realizing that the real power structure, the real government, is the private, run-for-profit Federal Reserve. And I meant to get to this issue of the hearings. Can you talk about what's going to happen tomorrow and then how you see the process unfolding in the months and years to come in bringing this corporate private banking dictatorship to heel?
Well, I think tomorrow's hearings will be pretty bland. That would be my guess. Probably not much media, but we'll get a recording of it. And Tom Woods is a good economist and historian from the Mises Institute. He'll be testifying for us. And he will have a very good statement, and he's a very bright person and knows, how to handle a debate like this. Barney Frank will probably be not antagonistic nor derogatory toward the bill, and he will try to publicly pacify the people who are concerned and worried about it. But I don't think it'll be big news tomorrow, but it's big news among our circles because we have gotten them to a point where many others who have tried over the many, many decades and have never gotten this far. Just think, Henry Royce, Wright Patman, and Henry Gonzalez, all coming from a liberal populist viewpoint, they were chairman of the banking committees, and they never got this far on auditing the Fed. So we are making progress, but it also might be a sign of how bad things are to wake up the American people to finally say, hey, what is this all about? What about this Fed? So I think it's the crisis that we're in as well as the time has come around, and I think our communications are so much better with radio talk shows like this as well as the Internet. This has really spread a message among people. Today I just walked out of my office. I was visiting with one of my constituents, and I had a young guy came out from his college. He was from Arizona, and his biggest issue was the Federal Reserve. And I think my constituent looked at him and said, wow, he was so impressive. Some college kid from Arizona State came up and he was fascinated, with the Federal Reserve. So we are making progress.
Is this the beginning of game over for the Federal Reserve? Because once they're identified as the true shadow government, the financial oligarchy, as long as they could operate in the shadows and pose as a federal agency, they were invincible. But once the curtain drops on the little man who we thought was the big, powerful Wizard of Oz, once the illusion is shattered, which is now happening, it begins the process of their fall.
I think it might be beginning, but I don't think we're very far along because I don't think they have yet begun to fight. I mean, they are going to be tenacious. Look at what they've done with the lawsuits under the Freedom of Information Act. They are resisting. They're fighting it. Those court cases are going to go on for years. They're going to fight this. They're going to resist and argue about turning over records. So it's not going to be real easy. I think what will happen when you have a dramatic change will be when the dollar quits working. I just think they're going to fight us tooth and nail, and it's going to be very, very difficult. They'll find the ways to further imprison people who demand that they use silver and gold. So I just think that it'll be runaway inflation, high interest rates, where the American people will say, yeah, I think we were told about this Federal Reserve, and we need to do more. And then they'll lose all credibility. And besides, printing the money won't help that much. The more they print, the worse it'll be. Right now, they printed a lot of money to try to patch the system together. And in some ways, they have patched it together, but they dumped all the bad assets on the taxpayer. You can't have a wealthy country by doing that. That has to have bad results. But when the dollar collapses, there's nowhere else to go.